Being here, we're going to go ahead and get started. Remind everyone to please put your phones on silent or turn those off during the meeting. Also, just a friendly reminder for everyone, we do live stream our meetings on to YouTube, so the camera's up here, and just please take that into consideration. And also, reminder to everyone talking into the microphone, please make sure you talk loudly so the folks online can hear. And then with that, we're going to begin our meeting as we always do here in North Ogden City with an invocation and pledge of allegiance. We've asked Councilman Satterthwaite to offer the invocation and then lead us in the pledge of allegiance this evening.
Our Father in heaven, we come before you as we begin this council meeting, express our gratitude for the many blessings that we enjoy as a people and as a community. We're grateful for the freedoms that make it possible for us to meet and to govern and to work together as a city to make this a place where people enjoy living. We're grateful for those who have fought for our freedoms and give thanks to their families and those around them that have made sacrifices for that to happen. We pray now that we can discuss things of importance on our agenda. We express gratitude for those that are here to provide input. We pray that our discussion can be a civil discussion. We, again, give thanks for all that we have, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilman Satterthwaite. Also, I'd just like to note Councilman Carl Turner has asked to be excused this evening from the meeting. We have up first our consent agenda. One set of minutes, Council, from March 21st. Is there any discussion on those minutes or action?
Motion to approve the minutes of March 21st, 2017.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes in the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Then that motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to the active agenda. First item, as always, is public comments. If there's anything anyone would like to share on any of these items or any other matter of city business, we invite you forward at this time. Just ask for your name and address at the start of your comments.
David Parkinson, 470 East, 2750 North. Hello again. I see you have the RCC zoning on here, and certainly I've talked to, I think, all of you about this before. I'm in favor of changing it so we can have accessory dwelling units there, but I'd also like you to consider having it in other areas in the city. I think there's a great need for this nowadays, for particularly the price of housing and stuff, and young couples trying to get started, and I think it can be done in such a way that very minimal impact on a neighborhood. I know I've rented mine for 23 years, and most people don't even know I have a rental. And I just think it's a great opportunity for the citizens and for the children of the citizens here. They like to live here in North Ogden. And so with that, I just hope you consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson.
Question?
Yes.
As a landowner on number 3, will I have an opportunity to talk to him?
Yes, Mr. Campbell, you will. So we'll might have some questions for you then as well. Okay, anyone else? All right, we'll go then to item 2, which is a discussion regarding an agreement with Rand's Roofing. We've been making a lot of progress on this item that's come before the council several times before. And our city attorney, John Call, has a little update about where we are on this item.
So, council, if you remember from our meeting, is actually the meeting of the minutes you just approved. In that meeting, we had talked about possibly getting an update to the site plan. That hasn't happened yet, partially because I didn't follow up on it and making sure that we got the new one. The applicant has, or the landowner has been notified that we need that site plan. And so what we'd like to do is hold off this discussion until we get that. So because it's an integral part of the agreement, it actually includes the percentages of lot coverages for the landscaping and other things. And I believe in the motion, the council said they wanted to hold the 50%. And so I just wanted to make sure that we had a site plan that showed that was being met before, you really approved it, because I think you should have that before you approve it.
Any questions for John, council? And if not, then our recommendation would be, after any discussion you wish to have, we'd recommend we just table this till next week, when the applicant's attorney, at least we've reached out to, and it looks like we'll be able to get that site plan before next week, so that can be included in the meeting next week. Councilman Swanson.
Will we have that site plan in time for us to actually spend some time reviewing it before? Can we have it Wednesday, Thursday, so that we have time to?
I've asked for it to be here in time to go out in the regular packets with the council information. So,
Thank you.
Councilman Satterthwaite.
Will we have staff more? Can we get more staff input? Those of you who've been on email know the email that I sent out, and I won't go into the details there, but I've made more inquiries. I've actually gone out and seen a couple of situations where this slag material is being used. And then I made calls to our engineer and to Gary Kerr. And I think some input from those people and from staff that addresses some of the issues that I uncovered. I'll say this up front, that I apologize if those that were in favor of this already knew what I had discovered, and maybe I was slow in the uptake there, but basically I discovered that, one, we are going to approve the slag as a road base or as a hard surface, making it equivalent to cement or asphalt. Number two, we're going to approve the same slag as a landscaping material. And number three, we're going to approve allowing people to drive on the landscape material, which we don't do that in code that I know of for any other landscape material. So those were the issues that, and I know I'm kind of sticking my neck out there, and I know that I was on the low end of the vote on that, but I'll apologize up front if that was already known to those of you who approved it. I think that information was new to me, and I think it was worth bringing up. I also think that staff ought to be giving us some input, especially when it comes to the initial time this agenda item hit our agenda. It was very generically worded and stated that we were going to come up with standards for landscaping and roads and so on for the zoning, different zones in the city. It had nothing to do with the particular individual situation we're talking about. And now we've gone from something very general to something very specific, and by going to something specific, if we vote on it, we're going to establish kind of a de facto set of rules or code that isn't in place right now.
Let's ask, we got our city planner, Rob Scott, and John Call. Would one of you like to address any discussions that have been had along those lines, or can we get some information back to the council about it if you're not ready to explain it now?
I think that, and if I remember right from that March 21st meeting, we did identify that the slag one we would need to bring back to the council for an ordinance amendment for general applicability across the city. So I think we talked about that. Although, like you said, we didn't get out into the nitty gritty specifics. I think that I'll have to go through the meeting minutes and remember what we talked about. But I think the intent was not to include slag as a hard surface replacement, but it was to allow slag to be a surface you could drive on, as well as, because it was pervious, allow it to count as landscaping as well. So it was kind of it would end up being kind of that dual purpose. But I don't think we intended it for it to be hard surface, because a hard surface means you can park on it anytime you want, and that's not what the council passed. The idea was they could drive on it and leave a car there during the day, but not for longer than 24 hours or the night. But what I'll do is try and bring a summary of those things back next week, if that works. Or would you prefer I just respond to the email so that you have time to process it or, think about it?
Well, and yeah, you can respond to the email. I think maybe respond to whatever comments we get here. I don't know that any others will chime in here, but the other hole in this whole situation for me is that we don't have a standard for slag. And in talking to the engineer, he has no standard, and he has no intention of using it in anything, that the city's going to do or any public right of way. And I came to find out by talking to the salespeople for the slag that there's two different kinds of slag. One that has lime and other materials that will set up over time, given precipitation, that sort of thing, and the other one does not have that at all. And we're not specifying which is which. Okay. And then in looking at specific applications, about 3 different methods were used to put this down, varying sizes and thicknesses. And I was asking, Matt, or the engineer, about the weight-bearing capacity and some of those kinds of things. And then talking to Gary Kerr, he said, well, we'd never approve that without going to the engineer and getting his approval. And then I already knew what the engineer had said. So I think we need to get our arms around all of that. It can probably be done pretty concisely, but.
So John, do you feel you've got a good list of those considerations or notes on what was requested? Councilman Swanson.
I also went out to a location out here on 2000 West that's used 3 different sizes of the slag on there. It's a heavy equipment operation, so similar in use. And I've got photos on my phone that I can share with you guys. But it ranges from looking like it would be very useful to not useful at all, depending on the size, the depth. What I was guessing is the inch and a half size. It looks like crushed volcanic rock. That's what I thought it was at first, but it's actually the slag. Looks like if it were compacted well, that it might be a good surface, but as Lynn has found out, there's no standards. And some of the smaller heavy equipment, as it was being, track hose were being turned, I mean, they just augured down through because it wasn't compacted, it wasn't retained in any way. So it just opened up a lot of questions on, and where the P size was used and was compacted, you had a lot of standing water, as there was no drainage. And I've got pictures of that as well. So it just raised some questions that I think we need to understand this material and its use and get some standards before we start letting individuals as a whole use this.
Okay, and that sounds also good for the discussion John mentioned of coming back likely after this, but to create a more permanent standard for this, because I'm sure it's going to come up again as this material, I certainly don't expect it to be as popular as gravel or others, but I'm sure there will be other, instances where someone would like to use this material. So those are definitely good discussions to have. And John will work on that this week as well and get that information out. Any other discussion on this item?
Mayor, I'd move that we table this discussion until next week when we have the information that we've discussed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to table this item till next week and to work on the information that's been requested. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So we'll bring that one back next week. Okay, we'll move to item 3, which is a request for a sidewalk deferral on a small subdivision on 2750 North. And our planning director, Rob Scott, will be the presenter on this item. And welcome, Rob.
Thanks, Mayor, members of the council, those in the audience. This request is a part of the approval of the Campbell subdivision located at approximately 995 East, 2750 North. This parcel, as you're going to see here on the air photo, has a property that has gone through a one-lot subdivision process. So as we go through these processes, then one of the things that's examined is the lack or the need for various infrastructure. So one of the things that was identified along the street there was the need for curb gutter, sidewalk, expansion of some of the pavement, et cetera. In addition, there were a couple of light poles that were a challenge. One of those light poles was required to be moved by Rocky Mountain Power, and that has already been accomplished. The Planning Commission has granted preliminary and final approval regarding this particular subdivision, and now, as a part of the subdivision review, the owner and developer of the property has requested that the city council consider a deferral for the sidewalk. The lot itself is approximately 287 feet wide, and as you can see on the aerial photo, it's bisected by the Rice Creek drainage, kind of running from northeast to southwest across the parcel. I don't have.
It's the pointer.
Thank you. There you go. So this is the parcel here, and then the drainage goes across this backside. There's some conditions that really are not part of this discussion that orient themselves to the protection of that drainage way and what have you. Those are conditions of approval that were established by the Planning Commission as part of our overall review process. So the ordinance requires that the Planning Commission give you a recommendation regarding whether or not to grant deferrals or not. The Planning Commission, they did not have all of their members there. There were 5 members of the Planning Commission in attendance at this last meeting. So on a 4-to-1 vote, they're recommending that you grant the deferral. So as a part of that discussion, as you'll see in the report, Planning Commissioners felt that there was no sidewalk in the area, and it is unlikely that the developed neighborhood will be putting sidewalk anytime soon. So there's some discussion, just by way of education, to the Planning Commission relative to how that process could unfold. Obviously, if property owners came together and decided they wanted to put it in, they could certainly do that. Additionally, the city could establish an improvement district and accommodate the development of sidewalk in that area. Or the city could establish a fund and start putting in sidewalk. A contrasting point of view was expressed by Eric Thomas, one of the planning commissioners. He expressed that by putting in the sidewalk, it will spur the city to begin either establishing special improvement districts or funding sidewalk installations. So those are that's the recommendation from the Planning Commission relative to that. So again, just by way of summary, this is the property, 287 feet long. There's curb and gutter in the area. Applicant has agreed to put the curb and gutter in, requesting a deferral on the sidewalk. I'll be happy to answer questions. Council?
Council, any questions for Rob?
And you do have a letter from the applicant addressing the reasoning why. Should point that out.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. We might have some more questions for you, and we'll invite Mr. or Mrs. Campbell, whoever would like to present your items of discussion to the council.
Thank you. I'm Scott Campbell, reside at 720 East, 2600 North, and I appreciate your time in considering this. I think where our community is concerned, when we look at issues like this, number one has to be safety. Rob's been educating me on this. Safety is always number one. And then you can see on the plat there that from the section that seems to fit together is from 850 East to 1050 East. And of course, we're concerned about our school kids and having a place to walk. As you can see, there is a continuous sidewalk along the north side, so there is a place for the kids to walk back and forth to school, runners, walkers, and so forth. On the south side of 2750 in that interval, it's a mature neighborhood. This piece of land that we would like to build on, I think, is the only remaining piece that's open. I would just ask you to fast forward a few years, 10, 20, 30 years. Whatever we do here with regard to a sidewalk is probably going to stay that way because these homes are all very well established. There's no room for any subdivisions or developments along here. So whatever we do, that's the way it's going to be. And in my opinion, it'd look awful weird to have sidewalk right there in front of our house and nobody else has it. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Council, any questions for Mr. Campbell? Okay, thank you. We may have some others as the discussion goes along. So, council, discussion on this item.
Let me say right up
Is that
front
okay?
that because Mr. Campbell's my brother-in-law, I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion and vote.
Okay, thank you. That we'll note in the minutes.
That's a good idea. I think you should.
Councilman Uri?
John, if, let me refresh my memory on a special improvement district, you have to have more than 50% of the homeowners vote for that? Or of the property? I mean, you just can't, the city can't go in and say, we're gonna do a special improvement district unless the people that own the property are in agreement with that. Is that correct?
I believe that's the way it's written in the code now. They've tinkered with it a little bit, and I wish I knew it off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that you need at least you have to notify everyone, but I think you do need a certain percentage of people who are in favor of the special improvement district at the same time. So.
Real quick, not to interrupt, but is the special assessment district the same?
Yeah,
Okay.
the state code calls it a special assessment district as opposed to a special improvement. Special improvement district usually refers to like a sewer district or something like that. That's an actual organization.
And that would be a concern of mine if the city could go in and say, hey, we're gonna put that and bill everybody, then that's not gonna stay that way for 30 years. You know, that would the city could go in any time and do it. But I think the way that, if I remember, we did some when I was on the council before where we put some curb and gutter in, and I think that a percentage of the property owners, and it took, like, Rob, if I'm saying this wrong, that if somebody owned an acre of ground, they had more weight on that than somebody that had a quarter acre lot.
I think, depending on the improvement, there is a formula that you base that on. Whether it's acreage, it might be actually in something like this, I think it's the lineal feet.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, John, it's a certain number of, you don't necessarily have to get people to sign up, it's the number of protests that you get. I may be wrong on that. It's been a long time since I was involved with something like that. But there is some type of a process to determine exactly whether or not you meet the threshold or not for those type of setups.
If I could interject one other thing, and that this, if the council chose to do this, there's some language we put now on the plats when that happens, right, about the sidewalk?
Yes, we do.
Deferral agreement,
Deferral agreement, and I keep track of those deferral.
and it's signed and it carries to the successor property owners, right? So we have a thing that they couldn't get out of it Not saying you should or shouldn't. I just want you to have the information that we now, if a deferral is granted, that it's subject to this signing of a deferral agreement that's binding on that owner and successor owners to where they will participate in a special assessment district if one's ever done. So that's our procedure right now. We've had a couple in the last few years, and then Annette does those agreements and keeps them. Mr. Campbell?
Happy to sign that.
Okay, happy to. So, again, if that's the route the council goes, just so you know all the information. Councilman Swanson.
I just pulled up on the internet, Special Assessment District in Utah, and it does say 50% or more of the registered voters residing within the territory proposed to be included, or the owners of half or more of the area of the land proposed to be included. I think that's where the weight comes in if you own more of the land. File written protests. So you've got to have 50% or more in favor or 50% or more against it, is what I'm seeing here. As I've thought about this, it's kind of it certainly makes sense logically, just looking at it. There's no sidewalks anywhere on that south side, so I agree, it would just kind of be weird to have that sidewalk sitting there. But at the same time, the discussion that we've had as a council for quite some time now is that we've got to start somewhere with sidewalks. This city has a history of deferring sidewalks, and here we are in some cases 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road, and there are no sidewalks because they were deferred basically in perpetuity, and there never will be sidewalks now where there should have been because they were deferred and deferred and deferred and deferred. So I'm struggling to balance the future needs, understanding that 30 years from now, there still may not be any sidewalk anywhere, and understanding what you have to go through to have that special assessment district to even get it done in the first place. So those are my thoughts at the moment.
Okay, other discussion. Councilwoman Stoker.
Those were some of mine too. I mean, it doesn't make sense, but there again, we had this discussion on putting sidewalks in and starting somewhere, and I don't know, it's like some consistency somewhere, some way, somehow.
My recollection is that we actually had some people that asked for deferment and we turned them down on it.
I did.
Right over on
Just some time ago.
2100 North.
Over the past few years, there have been some that have been granted and some that have been denied.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't say exactly what the pattern was, but I think the ones in general that were denied were ones where there is some growth potential, nearby. One in particular was along the Monroe Boulevard corridor. We denied that one because there's going to be new homes there. Whereas some, like on 2600, was granted the duplex area because there's no homes there that have sidewalk adjacent, but they had to sign the deferral agreement.
It might come down to just two people voting on this thing. Because I need to declare that in front of my property, although I don't remember signing a deferral agreement, I was granted a deferral when they put in the, I sold a piece of property behind me, and at the time, I think it was Councilman Bob Napoli, I had to have a two-lot subdivision, and at the time, Councilman Bob Napoli persuaded the council not to vote for that two-lot subdivision unless I would agree to put in the sidewalk at a stipulated day sometime in the future. I don't recall signing any kind of a deferral on it, but I verbally agreed to that so that I could get the two-lot subdivision done. So, maybe I have to recuse myself because You know, I can't very well vote against somebody something that I took advantage of. So it's down to you two.
Okay, other discussion.
Well, I'm inclined to grant it just because I think the uniqueness of the place, as you mentioned, Mayor, there isn't a potential for other subdivision growth in the area as they're, thinking back to 2 or 3 of those that we've denied, they are right in proximity to areas that are almost immediately or in process of being developed. We knew where street edges were. We knew where sidewalks were going to go. Where in this place, the reality is we can require it, and it will have a 230-foot piece of sidewalk that goes to nowhere. You know, the bridge to nowhere, the road to nowhere. It doesn't. So I would make a motion that we grant the deferral.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to grant the deferral, and I'm going to ask, assuming subject to the signing of a deferral agreement.
Yes.
Second, you concur with that?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to grant the deferral subject to signing a deferral agreement as I've described that will require the person to participate in an assessment district in the future if one occurs. So let's, further discussion. Are you voting, Councilman Uri?
Well, I don't know, I'd defer to John. Should I recuse myself on something like that?
I don't think you need to.
Okay.
Essentially, especially if you're voting in the same way that you were treated. Does that make sense? But this decision doesn't make a financial impact on you. You might, I mean, for example, a good situation would be if any one of your properties was put into a special assessment area where it actually has a financial impact on you, then you could recuse yourself there. But this doesn't have a financial impact on your property.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I'll vote.
Okay. Because otherwise, we actually couldn't pass it, because I can't be a vote when there's only 2 council members. So I can only vote in the case of a tie.
Cheryl, we could have made this a tie and forced the issue.
So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. When we have one gone, one recused for sure, maybe a recusal, we're getting down to not being able to do the business of the city.
You have to start with a quorum, though. So you have to, if Jim were to recuse
Yes.
himself, the 2 won't be a quorum,
Right.
so we couldn't have a
Exactly.
vote.
So
We
there'd
couldn't
be-
even do a
yeah.
tie vote.
So, and even if there were, my vote couldn't pass it, because even if it were a tie, if it was a 1-to-1 tie and I voted, that's still not enough. Two council, or 1 council member and the mayor's not enough votes. Just a little city trivia. We went through this, John and I did, before the meeting to make sure we knew. So,
Ah, shucks. We were,
tried.
hoping.
so really the only tie I can break is if there's like,
2-2.
yeah, and it's not an ordinance, right?
No, an ordinance you could.
Oh, I could, okay. So, okay, well, with that discussion, then let's start the voting with Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Councilman Uri.
Since I've taken advantage of it, I'd say yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then that passes 3-0 with 1 abstention or recusal. And we'll get that agreement signed, Campbell's, with our city attorney and administrator, John Call, and Rob will be in touch with you about that agreement. Okay. All right, we'll move right along to item 4. The accessory dwelling units discussion council has been going on for some time. It's gone back and forth a lot, which is good. I think this is a big discussion item. It's been treated very carefully by the council, and we have a couple options to show you tonight. After hopefully council members have had an opportunity to do a little field research. Once again, our city planner, Mr. Rob Scott, will be the presenter, so we'll turn time to him.
Thanks, Mayor and members of the council. The last few times, the discussion has centered around whether or not you want to include as part of this ordinance detached accessory dwelling units. So what we've done tonight is prepare an ordinance that excludes accessory dwelling units. as well as the original ordinance. If you decided that you want to retain them, then you can do that as well. So, maybe,
And you meant it excludes detached units.
I'm sorry. Let me start over.
We'll
It
forgive you.
excludes, that's why John's there, to keep me on the straight and narrow. Thank you, council. To exclude detached accessory dwelling units. So one version excludes detached accessory dwelling units. The other one allows for them, as you've seen in previous versions of the ordinance. So maybe we can go to the strikeout one, John. That's,
This one? Number 7?
yes. So what council and I have done is gone through, and everywhere where it talks about detached accessory dwelling units, you can see the strikeouts there where we've eliminated that provision from the ordinance. I did find a couple other very small typo things, but they're of no substance. And with that, we've discussed this many, many times. I'll be happy to entertain questions.
Councilman Swanson.
In the disallowing of detached, we would be including in that a detached garage, something over a detached garage?
We actually eliminated that as well.
Okay.
Just felt like that is
Anything that's detached would be ineligible.
correct.
What we struggled with was if it's an existing garage, would it be allowed? But if it's not allowed, or if it is allowed for a detached garage, well, then I could build a garage and then come in a year later and add an apartment on it.
Right.
And so it was too hard to dance around. So we just thought it was easier to wrap our heads around.
And just to remind her a little bit of history behind this, when the staff prepared a draft of this ordinance, we had many discussions with the Planning Commission. That was an option that we offered to them. And I was frankly surprised that they were willing to allow for the detached accessory dwelling units. They certainly understand the rationale and the concern that has been expressed by the council. They've been a part of those discussions as well. So I don't think it would come as any surprise to them that detached accessory dwelling units would be eliminated. And it's hard to write a perfect ordinance. As part of what we do with these things is we work with them, and then we see the strong points and the weak points, and then from time to time, then we may see a circumstance where the application of a particular standard really makes sense, and we come back and we amend it, as you are certainly aware of the fact that we do amend ordinances from time to time. Any
So
questions, Mayor? I'd be happy to
maybe,
answer.
Rob, could you just refresh us all on the standards, size, area coverage, regardless of the detached for a second, on what is in both of these options? And just a few of the highlights of what this would allow.
Okay, a couple of the things that's in there, one of the things is that it has to include an owner-occupant provision as part of that. I think that's one of the key provisions to this. It's a distinguishing factor between that of a duplex and an accessory dwelling unit. It's the ownership factor that is really critical to being able to have an accessory dwelling unit. That's one aspect of it. A second one that I think is critical is that there's a requirement for some type of either in the case of a family member who is the primary owner and it's truly what I'll call a true granny flat, a situation where a family member is occupying that other unit, then under that circumstance, they have to register. If they're actually renting it to somebody else, then they actually have to apply for one of our apartment ordinances. So we have a very good, in my mind, there's a good tracking mechanism here for when those particular units are allowed or not allowed. The accessory dwelling units are not allowed for sale. In other words, you can't carve off the accessory dwelling unit as for sale, like a condominium or something like that. That's another, I think, an important aspect of it.
How about separate entrance, Rob?
There is a separate, so when you go to, maybe we can go to O, there you go, he's got them right there. So the total area of the ADU shall be less than 50% of the total square footage of the primary residence for an attached accessory dwelling unit. So there's a scale aspect to the allowance for an accessory dwelling unit. They can't be in the front or the corner lot side yard. Has to meet all the setbacks of the primary residence in the zone. In terms of appearance, the architectural design, color palette, materials for an ADU shall be similar to the primary dwelling unit. If it's within, it's attached and within, then that is easily accomplished. ADU and primary dwelling must be on the same parcel, may not be subdivided. 5, the height shall be conform to the height limitations for the zoning district. Location, they may be allowed as long as the zoning requirements for properties in a single-family neighborhood are met. They shall not be within the building front, rear, or side yard setbacks for the zoning districts. So they have to comply with all of those setbacks. All accessory dwelling units are allowed over the garage, providing the parking within the garage is not converted. So if there is an attached garage, they could convert that space above to be an accessory dwelling unit. And then B, attached dwelling units are allowed inside the primary residence through an internal conversion of the house unit as an addition or in the basement. Number 2, by an addition to the house containing an internal connection between the dwelling units, provided the addition will not alter the single-family character of the building. And then,
Number 7 answers my question.
thank you, building entrances. Accessory dwelling shall have a separate entrance located on any side or rear of the single-family home, or at the front of the home if it is below grade. So
And then there's parking requirements as well.
there are parking requirements in addition to that. So I think you've got a really strong basis for making sure that these units are a contributor to your neighborhoods as
Okay.
opposed to a negative.
Then real quick, can you tell us, so that's in either option. What about if council selects the option for detached to be allowed? What are the provisions there? Please just refresh our
So,
memories.
You can see where we just go right there. So if they were to be allowed, they would be allowed over detached garage. They would only be allowed in the rear yard. So you couldn't have them in a side yard. They would have to be on a minimum of a 20,000 square foot lot. They shall have a minimum separation from the primary dwelling of 15 feet. Those are standards that you requested. And then subject to all of the site development standards within the 11.7J is the.
Up to 40% of the total square footage, right?
Correct. And so 11.7.4 is the RCC zone. It's the only zone that it's allowed in under this ordinance. If you decide to after you've had some experience with this, feel like that you could feel comfortable about allowing it in other zones, it would be a very easy fix to do that.
So council, then you've got two options tonight. Big difference between them is detached allowed or detached not allowed. So questions for Rob?
So Rob, I just want to clarify. So what we're voting on tonight would be just an ordinance that affects the RCC zone?
That's correct.
Because we have some of these and have allowed some of these in RE20.
You have a separate ordinance that's in the RE20 zone.
Okay.
In a little research that I did on this, I ran across an email from an individual in the city, and I don't remember the name, but their request was that we hold a public hearing. I mean, I think that was pretty specifically, and of course, the intent is that we get more input. And
Both the planning commission and the city council have previously held public hearings on this ordinance.
yeah, I understand that. And my understanding is that that email, which I think the mayor responded to, has come since the public hearing. So we ought at least discuss whether, since we don't seem to have any, I don't know whether we have any public input there or not, but I hate to keep pushing this off. I'm ready to vote, but in consideration of that individual and the fact that we have no one here, I don't know if we made any effort to, but I would, just because I think we were positive in our response that we would try to accommodate, and maybe we wait another week.
Councilman Swanson?
While I understand what you're saying, Councilman Satterthwaite, I think I'm with you. I'm ready. I'm like you. I'm ready to vote. And as Rob mentioned, we've had at least 2 public hearings, one in Planning Commission, one in City Council. This is one of those dead horses that we've flogged for a long time. That and I'm comfortable with where I am and where my vote would fall and what I would like to see, and so that's how I'm feeling at the moment.
Okay, other discussion on this proposal, the 2 variations of the ordinance.
Well, my recommendation would be that we vote on the option without detached units allowed. That we have attached only.
And I have convinced myself, I've seen the examples where I think this is done very tastefully, and it can work where there's detached units, and so I'm headed that direction.
Can I ask a question, Rob?
Yes.
If someone has a detached garage and they wanted to convert that into one of these things, under our old ordinance, if I'm remembering right, all you had to do is construct a roof between those 2 buildings, and then that becomes considered attached.
Depending on the timing, at one time, the RCC zone, we allowed for duplexes in that zone. So in that case, there wouldn't have had to been any attachment to the garage.
Well, I'm just
It
thinking.
simply be built, it could simply be approved, if you will, as a second unit.
I'm thinking about some years ago, my mother-in-law, before she passed away, was living with us, and she had asked me, I have a detached garage, she'd asked me to make that into a mother-in-law's apartment for her. I came down and talked to Gary, and Gary said, yeah, you can do that. All you have to do is construct a roof between the 2 buildings, and that becomes attached to your home then.
That is a potential option.
And that's per code. We were okay with that.
They would still, I mean, it would still have to meet the setback standards. So they couldn't attach a roof if the accessory building was within 3 feet of the property line. It would still have to meet the minimum property distances,
mine-
which at your
mine
house
had-
it would have,
Yeah,
but other houses might not.
yeah.
So it wouldn't be a loophole for someone to violate the setback ordinances.
Right.
Okay, other discussion.
So I'm going to make a motion to approve the ordinance that allows for accessory dwelling units, including unattached accessory dwelling units.
Okay, we have a motion to approve accessory dwelling units ordinance. Actually, Annette, do we have ordinance number?
2017-10.
Ordinance 2017-10.
So the 2017-10 is the one that uniquely allows the,
It's the number, no matter which one gets passed.
so add the ordinance 2017-10 to my motion.
I think I would second that. I think in my mind, we'd put some things in place there would safeguard the size of the lots and so there's not on tiny lots and those kind of things. So I think I could live with it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 2017-10 with the version of the two that have been put before you, council, including detached accessory dwelling units, subject to the provisions that are included. Is there further discussion? Councilman Swanson.
What, looking down the road a little bit, what do we need to do, would we need to do if we decided to expand this to other zones?
Well, Rob?
Let's see if I can find it here. The provision is called zoning. It's on page 4, E zones. An accessory dwelling which meets ordinance requirements may be allowed in a single-family dwelling unit within the RCC zone. So it would just simply be just whatever which zone the council decided you would want to put in with that.
And what we do, if you notice, there's actually two things at the beginning of the ordinance. This first one adds an accessory dwelling unit to the 11J2, and 11.7J is the RCC zone.
Correct.
And what this does, the way Rob set this up, is by adding this 11.10.34 as an entirely separate section, all the council would need to do is essentially add accessory dwelling unit to any of the other residential zones. And this, because this section defines what an accessory dwelling unit is, if that makes sense.
I'd be interested, not to belabor the discussion, but I'd be interested to hear what others are thinking about expanding this to other zones.
Councilwoman Stoker.
I don't know that it would work in other zones. I think there would have to be definitely,
If we have the RE20 minimum lot size, I mean, basically a half-acre lot size.
That's what I would look at.
Remember, that's the
It works.
distinction for the detached ones.
Right.
So as I've looked at these other zones with our existing setback standards, for some of these smaller zones, even with the 20,000 minimum, it was virtually impossible
For a detached.
for a detached.
But
one.
somebody could
Correct.
have a granny
They
basement
They could.
and rent that out.
Yes. that
How do
is-
you all feel about that?
I would be
In the
for
other
that.
zones.
I think it'll kind of take care of itself with the requirements that we stipulate here.
That's how I was feeling about the non-detached. I wasn't, I'd come to a point where I was feeling comfortable with it, frankly, in all zones, given the controls that we seem to have put on there.
Yeah, that's my advice, even though I don't vote on it or likely won't. The detached, I still have concerns about the detached. However, I will say this version, after much discussion, is a lot better to provide a lot more, and I hate to say controls, but just reasonable restrictions on where and when it could be done. So I'm still not personally a fan of the detached idea at all. You know, I would just not allow it. But I think this version restricts it to only certain places where it really could, you know, fit a lot better than just, hey, anywhere can have a detached unit. So I would, yeah, I would probably just stick with the attached if you expand it to the whole city till we see how some of these detached worked out. That would be my recommendation. If you do eventually, if this passes, and then you're going to put it to all the zones, maybe just consider the attached at first, because that's frankly what most people do, a mother-in-law apartment or a basement apartment, and wait and see how a few of these on the detached play out. But that's just my recommendation.
I would not be in favor of expanding to other zones right now. I just think, as I think about the zones, I don't think they'd fit in most of the small lots. And
What about the attached, where you're just renting out your basement?
I don't have a problem with that.
I don't either.
So, John, is there a way that we can do this, that I could amend this motion that, well, I don't want to make this a really muddy deal, but I also don't want to spend more time on this than we have to. We've spent a lot of hours sitting here discussing this. Could we approve this as attached accessory dwelling units for all zones and detached in the RCC only? And then expand it if we decided that later down the road, a year from now or whatever, that we wanted to see the detached expand everywhere, come back? Or should we just go with what we have here and then come back?
I think if you were going to do detached in the RCC and attached someplace else, everywhere else, or, I would like to see the actual language in front of you before you made the vote. And also, if you were going to do that, I might have some concerns about the way it's been noticed to now just blanket the whole city with it.
Sure.
And so it would give an opportunity to pass it as an attached or detached in the RCC, and then when we go to the other zones of the city, we do another hearing and let the residents all know. Just because of the way it's been noticed, it's always been confined to kind of the RCC zone, and I'd hate to spring that on our residents.
Councilwoman Stoker?
So my concern is, Rob, does this protect us or the city that somebody cannot come in and put a duplex in?
Correct.
And then is there any way that,
It has to be separate.
yes,
They could have a second house, but
the,
physically separated.
but and then also, I know we have setbacks and certain sizes and that, but is there any way that it has to blend in with what the home is or what the surrounding neighborhood is? Is there any
Yeah, he had some.
language that way so they can't
That's
just
in there.
do
Very
that?
in there. I think we do have some good language with respect to that specific point.
So it can't be siding, aluminum siding or,
It's got to be the same material,
So it has to
basically.
be the same as for similar.
That's right. Is it right here?
Yeah, you just passed it.
What's right here?
It's up above.
Isn't it this?
No,
It won't alter the single-family character of the building?
a little higher. It's more specific. In item O, basically. There you go. Item O3.
So, yeah.
Similar to.
So it's got to be the same architectural similarity to the original structure. Okay, further discussion on the motion currently before you is to approve accessory dwelling units, both attached and detached, in the RCC zone. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll start the vote with Councilman Satterthwaite.
Vote is yes.
Councilman Uri.
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
No.
Councilwoman Stoker.
no.
So,
So we know how that's gonna go.
well, I would rather we would do this when Councilman Turner is here.
Can I suggest an amended motion at this point? What's protocol?
John?
So the mayor needs to, since vote's been called for, the vote needs to be finished.
Okay.
I
Need to take a recess.
I would really say I don't like voting. In fact, I think this is the first time it's ever happened that I've been the mayor to vote, because as I hope you all know, I mean, I try and let the council be the ones who make the decisions on ordinances and not me. So, however, I'm a no on this one. So that motion fails, but Councilman Swanson, you had an alternative motion.
I would like to move that we approve, had a brain block there for a minute, accessory dwelling units as proposed attached without the detached, and suggest that we revisit this down the road and see how things are going. And I'm not comfortable with the detached, and so that would be my motion, to at least allow the attached. And I frankly, I'll be very honest, I don't have a problem with attached accessory dwelling units anywhere. I'm okay with them in any zone.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the ordinance with the attached dwelling units only in the RCC zone. Is there a second? Okay, that motion dies for lack of a second. What I might suggest, council, is that you table this for when the full council's here. Because, I can't cast a tie-breaking vote, but really the legislative power is the council's, and I think that would be appropriate, if you want to consider that, or if there's another motion as well.
I think we should table it till Carl's back. and we have the
Motion,
full
motion to
council.
table agenda item 4.
Okay, we have a motion to table
Second.
agenda item 4 and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor to table this item, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Then that passes to table this item. We'll probably bring that back next week or the week after.
So, council, here's a question for you on this. Do you want to consider this for all zones and just do a hearing and do it? Or do you want to, or would you rather just try the RCC for now and approach it next week?
I'd just rather do the RCC for now.
Yep, same.
I'm for all zones without the detached.
Being contrary today. Is your last
I'm
first
sorry.
name Jim?
Okay, well then, we'll plan on bringing this back, like the mayor said, next week.
Okay. And then also, council, would you like to start gather some input on other zones or wait a little longer?
I'd rather cross the bridge when it comes.
Me too.
Well, a lot of people ask about it. It's not,
Then let them propose it.
okay, Councilman Swanson?
I've had conversations with half a dozen people, 4 of which are outside the RCC zone, and all of them asking about attached.
Yeah.
And I don't see what the difference is between an attached ADU in the RCC versus up there in my neighborhood. Somebody wants to rent out their basement, they've got the separate entrance, and they meet all the, I don't frankly care. My only concern is detached and how that can be used. I would love to, just so that we don't spend another 9 months discussing whether we do it in all zones, I'd love for us to at least have the discussion about having the attached piece allowing that in all zones, and experiment with the detached piece in the RCC zone. And if that goes well, then moving that on to other zones as we see it would fit. But let that be our experiment. I think we're all comfortable with the attached in whatever circumstance it might be, and I'd be happy with a blanket. If you live in the city and you meet those requirements, you can have the attached. We'll experiment with the detached in the RCC zone.
Let me ask quickly, Rob, did the planning commission have any discussions along the lines of other zones that could kind of inform what council's talking about?
Not formally, that was never noticed, but what John brought up with respect to the way that we structured the ordinance to have these standards put in the chapter that relates to standards for all zones, that was done on purpose because of that very point. So
Okay.
It makes it a very easy transition to add additional zones.
Yeah, it is something I think a lot of people are interested in around the city. Okay, Councilman Satterthwaite.
And I'm just repeating what others have said. I think it needs to be properly noticed so that those people have a chance to.
Right, this would be a lot bigger discussion because this sort of, in some ways, is a replacement of the former duplexes that were allowed in this specific zone, but they've never been allowed in other zones, although we know there are some cases where it has happened, but it's never been permitted. So it would be a very new introduction into the other zones of the city
The detached portion.
and attached.
Okay.
In no zone besides RCC can you rent a basement, for example,
Legally.
legally, right?
Other than our multifamily.
Or a multifamily zone.
And to make it clear, if they act as a family unit, so if they're sharing living space and laundry rooms and things like that, then they're treated as roommates, not subletters, or if that makes sense.
But yeah, to a separate renter, you know. So that is something, though, a lot of people I think are interested in, and it would be good when the whole council feels the time is right to have that discussion and get input from our citizens.
But somebody in one of those units, up or down, has to be a homeowner.
In this variation, yes. That's correct. Which is an important provision, I think.
Absolutely.
And the parking is important, because if we get a bunch of places with no parking, well, we're creating problems for our winter parking ordinance when there's not driveway for these renters to park. So that's, I think there's some really good things that are in here, and I'm comfortable with having the discussion too for other zones and get input from our citizens. I'm sure some will have some concerns, and I think there'll be a lot of people who'll be interested in it as well, so. Okay, so we'll bring that back next week as well.
FYI, never mind, I will be here.
Okay, let's get our public comments and then council comments. Anyone would like to share anything with the city council tonight?
Young people?
I was noticing them taking a lot of notes, and usually we ask one of them to take 10 minutes and give us a talk about what you've learned tonight.
A young man's got a orator kind of look about it.
Yeah. Future political leader
Could
right
just
there,
tell
I
us what
think.
you're interested is tonight. We'd be interested. We're always interested in residents' interest and input.
We're here for a school thing.
Okay. School
Get
assignment.
signatures and get some points, right?
Yep.
Okay.
What
You know
school
that you can
thing?
go home and look at the YouTube video and you never even had to step in the door.
I'm not even, this isn't my assignment. I just came with them.
They're pretty girls. That's probably a pretty good idea.
That's a good idea.
Cheap date, huh?
Okay, we'll go on to council, mayor, and staff. Rob, anything else you want to add? Okay, thank you. Annette? John?
You're going to talk about annexation?
Yeah, I'll cover it just a little bit. Okay, let's start at that end. Councilman Swanson?
I only have one, and I was approached by a citizen who is concerned about a home in which the parents, due to some windfall, are now living permanently out of country and still have their home here, and their 20-year-old child and their teenage child live in this place, and it's become a flop house, basically. It's I'm going to let Andra know about it. The yard is gone. In the year and a half that the parents have been gone, the yard is completely obliterated. There's no lawn. There's just bare dirt, and nothing is done. And on Friday, Saturday, and other nights, there can be 20 cars parked around the house till the wee hours of the morning, and there's no adult. There's an adult living there, but there's no adult supervision. And I'm sure the kids are loving life, but the neighbors are not. So I'll, just wanted you all to be aware of that, and I'll get that information. I'll copy you on the email that I send to Andra.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Uri.
Yeah, John, I'd like to have you right across from Andra's house and across from my house. There's some people there that bought a home a couple of years ago, and they don't take very good care of the yard, but recently they put right by the curb and gutter, they put some black plastic, and they pulled a motor home in on it that looks like it was probably pre-World War II. I mean, it looks like a piece of garbage. And it looks to me like they're planning on having people stay in that. But even if they aren't, it can't be parked there like that. It has to be parked up alongside of their house, the way our ordinance is written. So if you'd have Andra look at that. Then the other question I had, I had a question about how we got Utah Power and Light to move Mr. Campbell's light pole on 1700. We can't get them to move those yet. That's really kind of dangerous the way those ones are on 1700.
So the ones on 1700 will be moved in the next phase of that development. I think there's some barricades they put up.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, and so it'll be moved. And my understanding is that Mr. Campbell paid to move the power pole himself.
We did. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much to my dismay.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman Satterthwaite.
And so, first is just a request on an update on where we're at on that permitting requirement for Rocky Mountain Power and others, when we can review the language and actually get it to the council for vote. And what's the status on the library, and what's the status, if we know any update on Smith's, the
Ace
new-
Hardware?
The Ace Hardware, yeah.
John, do you want to take the Rocky Mountain Power one first?
So that is going to come to you in the new engineering standards. That's where that typically is addressed, but we'll also address it in the ordinance, but it's two places. And we'll have that. I don't know when the engineering standards will be here, because they're getting complicated as the change in the political climate at the national level has maybe amended some of those, and so they've just kind of been stalled at the Public Works Department. But we'll get them to you. As far as the ordinance for us requiring the permit, we can, although I think we can have that to you here in a couple of weeks, if you want it in a couple of weeks. We'll just need to find the right place to add it in to what we'll do is just put it in Chapter 9, which is our utility standards, and just say that they've got anytime they're doing excavation at all, including the installation of a pole, we need a permit if it's in the public right of way. So.
And that we provide information about any infrastructure, either existing or that we know where it will be located, and that they will avoid those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll talk about the library.
You're not going to give Cheryl a chance to talk?
Well, just because it was a question that was asked specifically. So I'm picking up tomorrow. I have an appointment to get the check for the skate park and deliver the deed for the property. So everything's gone according to what we discussed. We've kept the right of reversion on there for the original property, and the building permit has been as discussed. The city fees we paid, but the external fees will be paid by the library. The building permit's actually not quite ready to issue, not from anything from our side, but because the contractor's not been selected officially, and that contractor and their license number is a essential part of the building permit. So it's basically approved pending the library's selection of their contractor, which they have selected a contractor, I'm told, and the board next week, I believe, their first week of May, they have their monthly meeting. They'll approve the contractor, and then the following week, the county commissioner or commission will approve the contract in that second week of May. And at that point, they'll be within a couple of weeks going very seriously at the site. So sometime probably mid-May, we'll start to see mid-May to later May, the contractor on site. But from the negotiations I've had with Commissioner Harvey, everything looks good for us to pick up the check for the skate park. We have an appointment tomorrow afternoon.
So Mayor, last Monday, a week ago Monday, I was at the Roy Library to a Cowboy Poetry Festival and talked to the chairman of the library board who was there. He's not planning on, he's been on that board for 3 years. His plan is to not be on that board again, so there may be an opening on that board that we may want to see if we could get somebody in North Ogden that might be interested in that.
That would be good. Maybe one of our retiring council members could apply.
Yeah, I think Lynn would be great for that.
Then has plans.
Okay, so, and then, on Smith's was your other question, Councilman Satterthwaite. The contractor's been selected there, construction company, and it'll begin anytime now. I tried to get an update from the developer and haven't heard back. So Stout Construction, they've selected as their contractor. They're cleared for takeoff from everything on the city side, so they're just doing whatever on their end.
Is the first phase to increase that parking lot, or are they doing that, or is Smith's making the parking lot
That
better?
will be in the first phase, yes, my understanding. So they'll increase those spaces on the north side of Smith's. Okay, Councilwoman Stoker.
Don't really have much except, good job with Tiffany. If fingers are crossed on the pool. And I think the Public Works did a wonderful job on digging up the street and having it put back together as fast as they did, and that it's not bumpy. So they did. I think that was a great job and good work on catching that, like was discussed last week. And just always. Thanks for a short night. Thanks for the discussions. Thanks for the disagreeing to agree to disagree. Appreciate all of you and the mayor.
Okay, thank you. I agree with that as well. Comcast Cares on Saturday was a great success. We had 340 volunteers that were signed up. Some more as well. They came and maybe went directly to the project. So I thought it was really good turnout, especially for the first year of doing it, and I think it's something we should do again in the future, even if we don't necessarily have the sponsorship of Comcast. But we got a lot of projects. Every project that Tiffany and Dave had identified, we got completed. So it was a really good success. Just a little heads up, we talked a lot about accessory dwelling units, and then, Councilman Swanson mentioned a flop house, so just wanted to give you a heads up. We'll be having a discussion here in the next month or two about Airbnb, vacation rental by owner discussions and things. So we're kind of having the staff do some research on that, John and Rob, and just that's going to be another topic, somewhat related, but that's going to be coming before you for discussion. So maybe just start giving yourself some thought on your feelings on that. Little reminder: the green waste cleanup begins next week. It's May 6th, which is next Saturday, and then picking up again May 8th through 12th, which is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I believe. Maybe not quite. 8th to 12th is going to be, so May 6th and May 8th to 12th will be the spring cleanup, where we're taking yard waste, appliances, electronics, tires, and the pit's going to be open all week for free to help people get cleaned up for the year.
Will this be in time with the
Newsletter or the magazine? Yes,
And your
it is
Facebook
in the
page?
magazine.
in your Facebook?
Yes,
Okay.
and we'll put it on the website and everything as well. So it should be a really good event. We're looking forward to another good event with the cleanup. Then lastly, the annexation. We'll be sending you out some information to consider on that. John had a meeting today with the county about the annexation, and we're just going to be sending an update to you, some things to look at. So please just take a look at that this next few days. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
You just want to
Second.
beat Cheryl.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
That was so fast.
We are adjourned.
Here's a note.